I'm great. I'm great. Thank you for having me here. And I'm so glad I caught the last like 4 minutes of that last conversation. Definitely super inspiring. And we always need to hear those encouraging words about making sure we're building relationships with people and how important the power of networking is.
I completely agree. And just, I'm getting a little verklempt you just saying that because it's like the people that come to this digital stage, this room, and just like I'm just eternally grateful to get to chat with folks like you. And yeah, Lexi B is a boss.
Yeah, and also congratulations on your new company.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
For folks that are maybe meeting you for the first time, I gave a little intro there, but I'd love to hear
Yeah.
more about you, your journey, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I have a background actually of community organizing and programming. My passion really is deeply, deeply rooted on access and power of Black and Latinx people and to have proportional representation in every single part in every single tech sector in every single economy, right, that this country has. And so I started at Code2040 as a relationship manager. And so my job was really talking to companies, really understanding the trends of the landscape,
Mm,
and really organizing companies little by little through conversations and planting seeds and asking for feedback to kind of change the way that they were thinking about policies, thinking about job development and job access. Uh, yeah, as they were growing. And so that those conversations, and I believe when I was a company manager, I was in that role for about 2.5 years. I ended up talking to about 70, 75, 76 companies in total. And so I got to learn a lot about how folks are thinking about hiring, how they think about inclusion, how they think about investment in talent, short term and long term. And then after that, I started my work here as a relationship as a partnerships director, and a community partnerships role. But yeah, that's kind of what drives my work here is like really building relationships authentically, but
mm.
also always understanding my role as an organizer in this field specifically for the long term change that we want to see.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit more about Code 2040. What's going on over there?
Yeah, Code2040 is an organization that aims to support the proportional representation of Black and Latinx people in the tech sector, and that want to like provide the resources for folks to be racial equity advocates, to have equity in the workplace, right? To have equity within tech, both in the products that people produce and work on, but also in the culture that people are a part of and investing in, and also that everyone that works is invested and investing in that culture consistently, and so really giving tools around that. And I think the vision here is that by doing both the by doing both the cultural change but also supporting people into getting and staying in tech, that little by little we get to change the tech industry to be one that really supports and is inclusive of everyone.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think it's interesting. I think, maybe 20 years ago, like being in tech meant something very different than it does now because tech touches everything.
Everything. Yes, it's part of all of our lives.
Yeah. So it's funny
Yeah.
when we're like, I'm in tech, and I was like, isn't everyone now? It's like if you don't make something with your hands, like you're in tech.
Or using, like all of us use tech too. And so we are
Yeah.
also all in even by the usage of tech, we're all investing in part of the tech culture as well.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
talk to me about what those strategic collaborations play in driving equity and inclusion within the tech space.
Yeah, so our strategic partnerships really work to identify, for Code 2040 at least, we work with our partnerships really to try to identify who the allies in the space are and to identify where we can meet different companies and organizations into this larger goal of equity and inclusion, right? So we prioritize partnerships, um, that have a holistic approach to equity, that aren't just thinking about let's hire more Black and Latinx talent, but that are thinking about how do we support this talent and staying here long term, or how do we support this talent into, becoming leaders in the field, and to, uh become managers, team leads, to become directors in our organization or in tech in general, and who see that kind of long-term investment outside of just hiring.
Mm,
Um, and identifying those companies. And something that I have found, especially over the last 3 years, is that because Code 2040 is really, really vocal about our aim to dismantle structural barriers, to make workplace equitable for everyone, and the belief that community really helps those goals. The partners that we have and the people that seek to really to be in relationship with are also very much aligned to those things, and can find us easily because of how vocal we are in that goal,
mm,
especially as the tech landscape has shifted and trends go up and down. Our that commitment has really allowed folks to be like, oh, actually, no, but I want to continue this work. And so we're going to seek you out and try to find alignment in our goals. And the other thing I wanted to say about like partnerships in general is that I think, especially in this moment, something that has actually been giving me a lot of life is that there are companies, there are organizations within the tech sector that are saying, like, no, we are committed to this, and we're going to make our goals are going to be even more investment or more long term. Even if what we read in the news and what we see in articles is saying, like, the trends of DEI, the trends of racial equity are going down. And so that's
yeah,
been really, it's actually been really great to see that, because I think, and I wanted to share this here in this space, is that there are companies and places that is still a strong commitment. And
yeah,
my goal as a partnerships director is to find those aligned companies and to find opportunities for their goals and our goals as Code 2040 to support the community of Black and Latinx technologists.
mm,
And that has come through, obviously we have job access opportunities, so partnerships in which, job fairs, or our folks get to interview with them and be exposed to their recruiters, things like that. But it also comes with companies that are like, we want to do this work, but we want to train our managers to unlearn bias, or to create more inclusion in their teams, or we want to train our C-suite to like think about this strategically through other avenues. And yeah, they still exist, and that's been really great to see. And so I want to say that, because I know sometimes we read the articles and we're like, not another company, but they're still out
yeah. No, it's really I appreciate it because it's important to hear the folks with boots on the ground. You're actually doing this. You're like you said, it's the doom scrolling of the articles can be heartbreaking, when you see this. And yeah, we the headlines hit the huge companies, right? Like everybody knows top of mind. We can name a couple of companies off the top of our head because we interact with them quite a bit. But it's great to hear that you're like, well, these 100 companies that maybe you haven't heard of are doubling down on their commitments. Yeah. So thank you.
And I think that's the role of partnerships in general, is being vocal about what your goals are and the avenues and opportunities, and really strategically thinking about which companies either have those goals or have initiatives that align to parts of those goals, right? So for example, as I shared earlier, for Code 2040, it's not enough to just have, Black and Latinx talent in tech. It's about building power, and it's about changing culture and policies. But we understand that one of those things is to get folks into the industry, right? And so we do have job placement opportunities that then allow folks to make the changes they want to see in tech, or that allow them to gain power little by little, and then can change things, when they're directors of teams or directors of initiatives.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And how do you find these partnerships? I know you have you have an alumni program, you have a summer summit. What are some of tell me more about those and maybe some other ways that you find these partnerships.
Yeah, so we have the summer summit, and I think we every year we have a summit or a weekend where we bring people in together in person. This year it's in Detroit. Last year it was in Oakland. We generally tend to choose cities where we have a large tech hub or a large starting of a tech hub, and that we can identify uh, companies or startups that are focused on equity as being a part of a value that they want to grow into and grow with. And so our focus, for example, being in Detroit is like really being in the, let's reach out to all these startups. Let's reach out to all these Black owned startups or minority owned startups and be in relationships with them and invest in them and have them invest in us and really bring our students, our alumni, our volunteers in connection with those companies that may not be known, right? Or may just be starting off, but would benefit from having an audience like the ones that we have here at Code 2040. So that's very strategic, as you can imagine, is where that summer program is and where we create those relationships and investment. And then we also offer training. So for example, this year alone, we have racial equity training that we have a lot of folks who a lot of companies who are like, we want our team of X to be part of, or we want our managers to be part of. And that's about like racial equity, how to identify what you can change as an individual, how to identify what you need to change within a team. Um, and then we also have, I think you mentioned this earlier, we also have a another training that's about just like managers and things like that. And so folks, I think really a lot of companies have internal resources that kind of support this. But I think what one of the things that we try to explain is how important it is to have these trainings be based on the experiences and the data of the folks that they're trying to support, right? So to really be able to have it from the perspective of like, these are the impacts of some of these things have on our on Black and Latinx professionals or on people that really do want to change policy at companies. And I think that's kind of a value that we have in that we have that data, we have those stories, we have those examples that sometimes the companies don't get themselves because obviously, if I work at a company, I'm not going to give you really direct feedback on all the things that may have happened to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you're building these partnerships, what are your cues? What are your signals that it's an authentic relationship and
Yeah.
you're building trust and it's not virtue signaling and all of that sort of stuff?
Oh my God, thank you for asking. So I think I've talked a little bit about the authenticity of relationships, but again, because we're very vocal from the beginning, folks understand that we're here long term. And so sometimes the conversations I have initially with companies who want to partner with us is like, racial equity will not happen in a year. Like just because you hire, 2% more people next year that are underrepresented than this year, like that doesn't mean that your company will be racial equity equitable, but it means that you'll have people who, especially if you're partnering with Code 2040, who are willing to do this work with you. But here are some other things that you need to do, right? And so that creates an authentic relationship because those companies are like, yeah, we're open. That's authenticity right there. But I do think what we do have to be intentional about is building trust. And some of the structures that we do have to do that is partnership agreements. I don't think happens everywhere, but our partnership agreements always have racial equity and feedback as two core components of the partnership. Like, hey, like if we're partnering for 1 year, we're gonna have at least 3 feedback conversations where we're gonna come back and be like, you shared that you had this goal about management. Here's what we're hearing about the management of your company. Or you shared that you had this goal about ensuring that the students that are applying to your internships feel safe and heard. Here's what we've been hearing. How are we doing as a partner? Like, how can we, like having those be part of the agreements has been really supportive
Mm,
in creating trust. And then the
mm,
second thing we always have as part of our agreements, other than feedback, is the understanding of racial equity and making sure that we are understanding what that means. Like, oh, it means that you're going to be thinking about your equitable hiring practices. It means that you are going to listen to your staff if they do have feedback. It means like we have those things and we set those up right in the beginning, not
Mm,
as like you have to be perfect because none of us are. We're all still trying to figure out what these things mean together. But because then it allows for space where we can be in feedback and in conversation and ask questions right from the beginning all the way through the partnership. And I do think that our most successful partners are those that are really hungry for that learning, outside of just like, let's say, like their hiring goals or, their sponsorship goals for the year.
yeah. So you have these partnership agreements. If you could make a partnership playbook for other organizations that maybe are interested in this, what would you title chapter one of this book and why?
Mhm. I like the way you frame that question a lot. I think just from what I've been talking a lot about, I think the start of, at least for our strategy, and if I was to write a book, the thinking about strategic partnerships, especially around racial equity, it would say something like ensuring that partnerships are aligned and invested in your organizational vision.
Mm,
So making sure that you're having conversations with partners very early on where they understand what your ultimate goal is and where you're understanding what their ultimate goal is, because then you can actually find opportunities for alignment, like opportunities where those goals really intersect, and that creates partnerships that are not like extractive or one-sided, right? Sometimes partnerships feel like I'm selling you a good and you're giving me a resource or money and that's it. But racial equity is not about that at all. It's a value. And so in racial equity partnerships specifically, I think you do have to focus on reciprocal partnerships and really being like, what are our goals? Not just
mm,
what is the exchange, but what are our goals and how can we support our goals more holistically? Um,
mm,
and so I will name that because we are a nonprofit, we don't actually have to uh like my goal, I have like an earned revenue goal and all of these things, but the base of what I'm doing is not towards having, 100 different partnerships, but it's about having quality partnerships that will actually want to do this work and will be talking to other companies or will be talking to other people and like really investing in that direction. Which I
yeah,
think has been really successful supporting um supporting our community to be hired onto companies that actually want to create inclusion for them, that are
mm,
actually invested, but also that uh create space for feedback. So for example, a sign of a good partner is, we might have a fellow who is for us, a fellow is a student who's trying to get into the computer science field within their first 3 years. A sign of success for a partnership for us is that student being able to say, like, I had feedback conversation with my manager, and because of that manager took the manager's training, they, responded very well, and I feel like I can give them feedback next time if I have any.
mm,
Or conversations where we've had with partnerships who have been like, hey, we're not able to hire anyone, like no one's passing our behavior interview, what do we do? And they're actually asking that question out loud to us and
mm,
trusting that we can be in that conversation, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of like, let's actually figure out, let's look at the data, let us share what feedback people are giving about your interview process. And being in that has been really fun. And that's only because we have quality like partnerships and not just like focused on, having a multitude of partners when we can't actually have those conversations.
right, right.
Yeah.
There's a transparency involved.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what inspired you to pursue this passion of racial equity in the tech space? And there's a lot of uncertainty right now, moving ahead in this
Yeah.
space. And I'm curious what keeps you motivated in the face of these challenges. You mentioned value and values earlier, so I'm curious to hear about that for you personally.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with like a story, which is about, because I feel like I've been talking about a lot about getting people into the sector, which is
Mhm.
obviously very important, but
Yeah.
just as important is like supporting people in staying in. tech and to
Mhm.
stay also like feeling connected to the industry and like basically staying up like yeah, let's say focused and connected to the industry, right? And so we, as you mentioned, we have like the regional meetings with our alumni. We have alumni since 2014. So these folks have been in the industry 10, 11 years now. And in December, there was a regional meeting in which we are talking to our alumni and our volunteers in Los Angeles. And both this alumni of ours who was in our program in 2016 and another alumni that was in our program in 2017, they were talking about their experiences now as more senior folks in the industry. One of them
Mm.
is a director of product, the other person is starting their own startup. Like they left their organization last year and started their own startup. But both of those folks were talking about just how within like the last 6 months they had faced bias in their companies. They had had really hard conversations about lack of inclusion in their companies. And the person who's starting their startup was talking about how that some of their ideas had been stolen, and they feel like it was because that person was like, oh, like you're not going to actually use this or not going to need this, like it's not going to go anywhere, right? And so those examples to me are actually what feed me in this work of knowing that this work is critical because you can have people who are, seniors in their professions and still feel the impact of the lack of equity and the lack of inclusion in this sector. And so for me, like that's really what feeds me and what allows me to continue this work is hearing those stories and seeing the crucial necessity of people having community outside of their companies uh to network and to be in the whisper network about and to with the decline with all of the layoffs that have happened in the last 2 years, the community that we're able to build and the partnerships that we're able to have, that's what supported our folks in finding other jobs or upping their resume or finding people who can send them referrals, right? And so like knowing that that's crucial in supporting people and staying in this tech sector, like that's what feeds me. It's
I love
just that it's needed.
so needed. Yeah, more
Yeah.
so than ever. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, yeah. You know, so we only have about 5 minutes left. I'm curious, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should ask you that you'd want to make sure we touch on today?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I want to name here in this space is just like especially when it comes to thinking about sponsorships and partnerships, it's just like reminding folks who are doing that work and who especially folks who are maybe like my organization or yours really trying to ensure that there's equity and really trying to ensure that different underrepresented groups get into the sector and stay in the sector is that there it is possible to have a reciprocal partnership and a partnership that is invested in your goals as well as theirs, and that it doesn't have to be something in which it feels like, oh, like I'm just providing them a service and they're providing us resource, that there is really a willingness to learn, if you find those companies or those organizations that want to do that work, and that oftentimes that work is a lot more like soul feeding because you actually get to see the change and you actually get to see um how these conversations and these like visions of your organizations play out versus I think sometimes this work can feel yeah very reciprocal or very short-minded.
Yes. Yes, indeed. What is the best way for folks to keep the conversation going with you if they want to reach out?
Just reached out on LinkedIn. My name, Selene Chala, is what you'll find. I think, the only Selene Chala on LinkedIn. And yeah, just have conversations with me. I'm always I'm always down to talk about partnerships, but I'm also just always down to talk about and be in community with people that are afraid or stressed about what's happening with current trends in equity and current trends in the tech landscape. Yeah, definitely down to talk about that and definitely have opportunities within Code 2040 to be in community around those issues as well.
Awesome. And folks want to learn more about uh, Code 2040, where should they go?
Code2040.org.
Org. Yes. Come on, nonprofit.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for Hunter for having me and also for your welcoming energy. I'm so excited that you all are doing this work and I'm glad it's been a success this week.
Oh, thank you. The feeling is mutual. Please come back. I hope we get
Thank
to do
you.
this again.
Thank you. Bye, y'all. Have a good day.
Your day.